I'm happy to welcome a dear and frequent guest of the Rise of AI conference. And whenever I think about this man, I really feel his mission. So he is really in for freeing human potential through AI, and he's really committed to create more room and space for creativity, for human potential through AI. So he has this combination of analytics and technology and a warm heart and a real interest for humans. Help me to welcome Chris Broos again on stage. Thank you, Chris, for joining us.
You.
I heard some investors also talk about you, and they said you have billion potential. That's received as a compliment, probably. But Chris is always, you might know that, a consultant to the German government, to the German chancellor, and I know that you think a lot about implementation of AI versus only piloting and showcasing. Is that?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a minute.
You will talk about that in a minute anyway. Yep. Right. So then, stage is yours, Chris, and the speech is AI is happening now, deal with it or die. That sounds promising.
It has to have some titles so you actually start up appearing. Thank you for having me. I am not having any slides. I have been on stages so much, and I noticed that you don't pay attention when there are slides. I think what I'm going to say is important, so you have to pay attention. I want to start out with the topic of sovereignty and digital sovereignty, because in times of crisis, which we've now had, first with a pandemic, then a war, maybe next economic crisis, and all this stuff coming up, depending who is talking, we need to understand, like, how can we work? And sovereignty consists of two parts, right? It's the ability to execute, which basically means either you own shit or you control shit. Then you're able to execute. And the second one is your ability to know things, which is education and retention. And as we've just very impressively seen, we seem to have good people and good education, but our retention is absolutely dramatically crap. Right? So these two components, executing and knowing, are kind of important for sovereignty. Then we look in Europe, we look at sovereignty and we say, like, well, we're doing okay, but there is a big difference between digital sovereignty and industrial sovereignty. And we have industrial sovereignty, right? We're fine, even though we don't own many raw materials, we have made contracts and supply chains and so on. Industrial sovereignty is all about raw materials, process, and supply chain. Digital sovereignty is all about intellectual property, software, and data. And these things are completely different from what we see in industrial sovereignty. And this is why we have a hard time dealing with it, right? In digital sovereignty, the players who play for digital sovereignty, they aim to own the users, the end users, and the developers. They aim to own the IP, because they buy companies not to own their revenue, but to own their intellectual property and these kind of things. So we have to rethink completely how we think of our ability to control our own fate. And I'm not saying that we should be aiming for autarky, meaning that we are isolated, that we're protectionists, and all of that. I think that's complete crap. I believe that globalization is actually a peacekeeping mechanism for all of us, and whoever said this didn't work, because there's war now in Europe, is totally wrong, right? We've had the longest period of peace ever. It worked. We just shouldn't abandon it. So let's go from there. What are the key technologies that we need, the key ingredients that we need in order to create digital sovereignty? Well, first of all, anything digital consumes energy. We need to deal with energy. And I'm talking about the production of energy, the transport of energy, and the storage of energy. And to be honest, we're not good at that in Europe completely. If you look at power plants, right, the patent packages for building all types of power plants, they used to be owned by Siemens and Hitachi. Now they're owned by Google. So energy, doesn't seem to be something that we're very strong at. And yeah, there are many jokes about how Germans would love to have wind energy as long as it's not in their house, right? So, and so on. So we're just not good at this. The second one is hardware, right? And hardware consists of three pieces. There is the ability to compute, the ability to store, and bandwidth. So compute power, storage power, bandwidth power. We are not good at that either. The best thing that we can probably do is bandwidth, because once we set our ass to it, we kind of get 5G working. And I'm saying this, right, because it's a constant complaint everywhere. Funklöcher everywhere, dead spots in Germany and in the whole of Europe. But if you look at this, right, I spend a lot of time in the valley. Like every other call doesn't go through. You have to try 2 or 3 times. Every month there's a brownout in San Francisco on electricity. Yet this is where supposedly all the innovation is happening. Believe me, the innovation is not tied to bandwidth or electricity. But if you want digital sovereignty, you need to control energy and the hardware part. We're not very good at that. If we want to be good at it, and we've just heard this from Hans, right, is if you want to be good at it, this means very large investments. Actually something that politics likes to do. Politics doesn't like to give out small grants, million pieces of something. They love to make a €1 billion announcement. Why? Because that actually makes the news, and this is the fuel that politicians live on and so on, right? So we actually love infrastructure projects. But then we're discussing infrastructure projects. For example, a European cloud provider, let's compete with Amazon today. And then it turns out you need about €100 billion investment in order to catch up with Amazon right now in its current state. And then I hit my head against the wall, right? Because it doesn't make sense to catch up with Amazon right now. You're wasting €100 billion and they will move on at the same time. If you want to catch up with Amazon, that's a 3 to 5 year project, because there's a 3 to 5 year turnover of all the hardware in the big data centers. And if you want to really build compute infrastructure, you need to invest now into the hardware that is there in 5 years, and not try and build a cloud provider with the current technology, because that is just too expensive, and you can be drowned out in the market very easily. So if you really want to catch up with these type of infrastructures that build on hardware and energy, which we're not good at, you need to start investing into the future of these type of things. Now then comes something that we actually are good at, which is APIs. The Germans are good at standardizing everything, right? The DIN, Deutsche Industrienorm, is everywhere, globally, and Germans love their standards. And APIs are a type of standards. We defined a lot of them in the open source world. A lot of the Apache projects take their API from Europe, and that is excellent, because having APIs and not just proprietary stuff that comes out because no one else can offer the service. Having common APIs means that we can actually turn from one service to the other for reasons of sovereignty, for commercial reasons, and so on. We can do that. We're good at APIs. All right, so now we have 3 pieces that we're not very good at. We have the energy, we have the hardware, we have the compute or the infrastructure to do it. We're not very good at it. APIs we start being good at. And then there's 2 big key technologies that drive the entire system, which is artificial intelligence and security. And security, the problem is not all the modern stuff that is security by design. The problem is that 20 years ago, we started putting web servers on DVD players without any security whatsoever. And those are now used against us and turned into bots, hosts, and so on and so forth. So security is a difficult problem. And that's why I'm starting with this, because I actually want to talk more about AI. Security is a difficult problem because it is turning the world upside down. Let's look at security from a political space, right? Before, if you wanted to be a government player or a nation player on a geopolitical stage, and you wanted to be taken absolutely seriously, you would have to own nuclear weapons. And the physics for doing nuclear weapons is actually fairly easy. You can go to Amazon, you can order the book that Oppenheimer used to onboard new physicists into the Manhattan Project. You can read that and you know how to build a nuclear bomb. The point is that getting the material and technology to do that is extremely capital intensive. So it is nothing that you can just do because you feel like it. This is kept, the idea of large, wealthy nations, or nations that committed a large part of their capital to the topic of mutually assured destruction, kept peace for quite a while. Unfortunately, we now do not have just one topic of mutually assured destruction. We have three. On top of the nuclear arsenal, which still exists, we have gone to cyber. Right? And cyber is a huge problem because all you need is a few pissed off IT people whom you pay handsomely, and then you can build a cyber team that can attack other countries. And I literally mean attack in a military sense, because if you turn off the energy or water supply for a city like Berlin or New York or London or Paris or whatever, people are truly screwed. Right? People will start dying within weeks. So we're not just talking about ransomware, I'll get to that in a second, right? We're talking about physical attack, and actually much better than nuclear weapons, right? Because people die and the infrastructure stays in place. And it's extremely cheap. If you can build a cyber team, let's say out of 20, 30 people, and you pay each of them 10 million a year, right? That doesn't even buy you a tank in conventional warfare. But you have just entered the stage of mutually assured destruction, with a very, very cheap budget. Cyber, from a political point of view, is extremely dangerous. And sometimes governments demonstrate this to each other, right? Helsinki Airport is one of the places where this is demonstrated quite a lot. Then someone turns off the lights for 5 minutes and then turns them back on. This is called blinking the lights, and it's basically showing, look what I can do. And if an airport is the sample field, think of how many back doors are found in really critical infrastructure that is 20, 40, 80, 100 years old, if you look at things like water supply or the electricity grid. Second part, mutually assured destruction. Third part is propaganda. Right? In a world where there is absolutely no buffer, where reaction has to be instant, if you don't react to something as a politician, as a decision maker instantly, then you're facing a shitstorm, right? The real point is that there's no time to think. So propaganda, which in old time used to be an inward bound thing, you used to make propaganda to keep your people happy to go to war, now propaganda actually turned into a weapon. We have 3 times mutually assured destruction, and this is why security is a huge topic. The current world-leading country in security is Israel, and Israel is fantastic at this because they have been feeling threatened since their creation. They have the proper mindset, which brings me to the last key technology, which is artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is the key technology to this transformational process and to sovereignty in a new era, because artificial intelligence ends the industrial principle. The industrial principle is that what we have been taught, if you want to solve a problem well and you want to make good money out of it, analyze what's there, standardize it so that you increase the volume, build a process that you're there, or consolidate whatever you have, and then build the process or the software or whatever is there. This usage of economies of scale is what our entire industrial mindset, our education, our industry, and sometimes even our politics and the society are made of. If you apply AI to this, by the way, if you want to have a joke, right, this is the reason why marketing exists, because we have standardized what people get, so now we have to market to them why they want it. But let's go back to them. The entire point of AI is that AI is able to create an individual solution for each individual problem. So if you're thinking about AI, we're not thinking about a simple pattern matcher or something like that. We're thinking about a problem solver. And if you no longer need to standardize, consolidate, right, that is very different. That means that the key competency of any company, which is now control of process, predictability, exactness, and so on, has to go out the window. It has to go out the window completely. And that means that the key part to all of this is not government funding, is not education. Unfortunately, I would love it to be education. It's not research, and all of that stuff exists. It's the ability to change our mindset. And that is extremely difficult because we have to do it to ourselves. If we don't, we just disappear. I have been doing AI for more than 25 years, and I very much enjoyed the research period of this and so on. For the past 8 years, I've been looking at selling AI in the market. And my conclusion is that AI is not sellable. Not because it's not needed, not because it can't do good results, but because the buyers don't want to change. They just don't want to change. And if you don't believe me, look at all these AI companies that try to sell AI projects, that try to sell AI platforms and AI services and so on. All of those, they sell because there's a huge interest in artificial intelligence. But they only sell pilots and POCs. And then whenever it comes to rollout, there's all types of stupid excuses like enterprise readiness or whatever so that they are not executed. And it's because the other end doesn't want to change. That is the only reason why automation hasn't gone from industrial-type automation to artificial intelligence, but gone from industrial-type automation to robotic process automation, which is nothing but a script, and that has been existing for 40 years, right? So the question is the mindset change. And the only thing that works in AI is if companies start applying AI to themselves. Right? If you compare the IT operations of any international bank to the IT operations of Google, there's about 1,000 times efficiency at Google compared to these IT operations at banks. And the excuse that bank is dealing with sensitive data and is highly regulated and blah, that just doesn't fly. Google is dealing with sensitive data and so on and so forth, right? This is not an excuse. The point is that Google has applied its own AI to itself. The banks don't have AI that they could apply to themselves. They try to buy AI. Of course, the organization doesn't want it, so they have to do something. They do 20 pilots. Applying AI to yourself is one of the key things that can happen. There are successful AI companies out there that take a topic, let's say something super simple like IT operations, because I stick with that and everybody knows that it's painful dealing with IT ops, and go from a labor arbitrage model, which is something that fueled the entire Indian economy, to an AI-based model. And it takes their margin from 20% to 70%. The customers are still buying exactly the same thing. They're buying IT outsourcing or process outsourcing with an SLA. Nothing changes on the market. The customers are happy. The application of AI is to the insight, to the production process. So the real question for all of us, if we want to apply artificial intelligence, and we know that we have the ability to research it, we know we have the talent, we know we don't have the ability to retain the talent, we know we don't have the ability from the bottom up, right? It means that very few competences we have in this entire chain of sovereignty is security and artificial intelligence. And security, I'm not sure if we can still catch up. But AI, we can definitely catch up. A, because we have the knowledge, and B, knowledge in terms of AI, but we also have the knowledge that can feed AI. Because European companies tend to not outsource until they've understood something. So all the knowledge about how things work today are stored in our economy, in our people. That is why we're at the table at all at this point. If we want to deal with this, if we want to be successful, all of you will have to become ambassadors for the mindset change that not an industrial process where you control, you exactly know which step the machine is going to do next and so on, but you look at an AI as a problem solver, like your neighbor, like your friend, and it will solve problems for you in a general way, and you can't predict the next move. Look, the cool thing about playing Go against AlphaGo was that it made moves that the Go player didn't expect. If you're an industry and you try to make AI completely predictable, you might as well have written a script or build a process. That's the mindset change we all need to go through. And that's the critical part. I believe that if we offer up funding opportunities, our governments will step in. I know that there's all these discussions, people bring out money and then it's never called for. I personally am very much engaged into education, and then we try to, for example, connect schools to the internet. We find out that we write to 16,000 schools, not even 1% replies, right? This is not because they're all assholes. This is because it is so hard to even allow a school to create an internet connection because you need 7 people at the table and no one has time to do this. And I know this is true for Germany and France. Italy has improved a lot there, and I think that we can learn so much from, for example, the Baltic states, how to organize that type of stuff. So artificial intelligence, either you'll do it, you probably have to do it to yourself, or you'll die. Because competing with someone who has 1,000 times efficiency on you is just not possible at all. So here's a few suggestions on what we could do about it. Number 1, we should accept that an ecosystem is not a nice, cuddly thing where everybody does their best and everybody loves each other and everybody has equal opportunity. The working ecosystems that we know, like iOS and Android, are built around a quasi-monopoly that is going out there and that everybody is joining. We should, in Europe, when we see these ecosystems evolve, we get cramps, right? We really get stomach aches. We need these ecosystems to evolve here as well. We'll need to allow someone to actually become that strong to host one of those ecosystems, or 2 maybe. The second part is we should turn our absolute desire to be perfectionist from an engineering skill that is done in the basement to something that is demanding for a leadership role. Right now, if you look at global industry, the good European industry they're perfect at stuff. But they no longer want to be the leaders. They no longer want to be the innovators because for innovation, you sometimes hit the wall. You sometimes get smacked. You sometimes have a shitstorm happening on Twitter, whatever. And then it's much easier to just be in the basement and be perfectionist. Get out there, demand to be leaders. The third thing is that we have a society question here. We have heard many times today already that in Europe we're totally able to educate the right people to produce fantastic talent, to do great fundamental research. People just leave. They leave to places where there's a dictatorship in place, or they leave to places where you have to, if you make that type of money, you have to live in a gated community so you're not robbed or your kids don't get shot in school. I think there should be every motivation for people to stay. The problem is that there is no societal contract about this. So if I can make one suggestion to all of us, let's try and get back to a humanistic society where community becomes for self, thinking comes before feeling, and actually the question of security is put behind curiosity. If we could do that, I bet you anything that a lot of the talent that we have lost would love to come back, because that's the type of societies that all these super talents in IT and software very much enjoy. So if you want to not die and get AI into your companies, into your life, let's try to become more human, because that will make the talent come back, and that will also accelerate our human ability. And look, humans are not made to work in an industrial machine. I'm sure you've heard that term, to be like a cog in a machine. Who wants that? That doesn't make you happy, right? People need a lot of work-life balance if they have this feeling that they have nothing to contribute and nothing to do. People want to contribute. AIs can do that for us. AIs can take the shitty cog in the machine work from us and can give humans back what they're actually good at. And there's two things that humans are really good at. One is making other people happy. And the second one, and by the way, if you don't believe this, try it out. If you feel more joy when you give a present to someone than when you receive a present. And this is not a dopamine hit. This is a much stronger drug. This is an endorphin hit. The second thing is people love to invent. Every little kid is born a curious scientist. And we spent 13 years or even 15 or 18 or whatever years to get it out of them. Like, you can't put people through schools that were made to not turn people crazy in factories, and then after they come out very uniform, like expected, go say to them, now please think outside the box. Let's stop destroying natural curiosity. Then we actually have the ability to apply AI to ourselves and have the supply of talent and people and everybody who is hungry for a better future that can come to us. This cannot be done by government, by the economy. This can only be done by you, each and every one of you. So please go out there and make the change in mindset happen, because otherwise AI is going to eat the world, and other nations and other blocs are going to come out on top of it. I think it's worth the try, and there's no reason to be afraid of the future. In fact, there's every reason to love the future that is driven by technology. Thank you very much.